The text from my brother Ethan buzzed through while I sat in my airy loft in Brooklyn, surrounded by half-finished canvases and the faint hum of traffic below. The spring sunlight slanted across the exposed brick, highlighting the vivid strokes of color that covered my walls. Pieces my family had once written off as cute hobbies from their impractical younger sister. Sold your old paintings for $50.00 each. You're welcome, Ethan wrote, punctuating the message with a smug emoji. Found them in Dad's garage when we were clearing out his stuff. At least now they're not collecting dust. I stared at the screen, coffee cooling in my hands, heartbeat steady. 5 paintings. The ones I'd left behind during my early years. Before the critics, before the gallery openings, before the world knew the name A. Rivera. Those weren't random doodles. They were part of my Genesis series, my first collection as A. Rivera, a name now whispered in the same breath as 6-figure bids and record-breaking auctions. Each piece had taken months of layered oil work, every brush stroke a battle I'd fought alone in a basement studio when rent was a gamble and hope felt like fiction. Thanks for letting me know, I typed back, keeping my tone flat. His reply was instant. Not mad. Thought you'd freak about me dumping your stuff without asking. Mad? Hardly. I was fascinated. Because those old canvases now carried a market value of $12,000,000 each. And the buyers? My own dealers, snapping up any A. Rivera originals that hit secondary sales. The phone rang. Ethan again, likely expecting tears. Hey Anna, he said, voice soaked in that artificial sympathy he wore like cologne. Look, I know you're probably upset, but honestly, $50.00 each was decent for amateur work. The guy at the estate sale said most people were offering $20. Estate sale? I asked, amused despite myself. Yeah, he continued, you know how Dad hates clutter. We cleared the garage, boxes of your old supplies, some canvases, those 5 paintings. Figured it was time. Dad could use the cash anyway. Dad! Cash. The irony nearly made me laugh. My father, James Rivera, the self-proclaimed financial genius, who'd built his modest consultancy into his personal empire of pride, had spent years lecturing me about the fool's errand of art. Get a real career, Anna, something stable, like accounting. And now, the art he dismissed had quietly eclipsed everything he valued. Who bought them? I asked. Some art dealer from the city, Ethan replied casually. Really nice guy, actually. Said he specialized in emerging artists and thought the paintings showed potential. His words, not mine. He even left his card, in case you wanted to connect about your future work. I almost laughed. Future work? The so-called dealer was almost certainly Harrison Cole of Cole & Mitchell, one of the most prestigious galleries in the country. Harrison had represented my work under the A. Rivera pseudonym for 4 years, guiding my rise through the contemporary art scene while I maintained my role as the family's cautionary tale. That was thoughtful of him, I said evenly. Yeah, and Anna, don't take this the wrong way, but maybe this is a sign you should think about a more practical career path. If a professional dealer thinks $50.00 is fair for your work, maybe it's time to be realistic. Ethan's voice carried the same tone he'd used since college. Smug, certain, the voice of the family's golden boy. MBA, mid-tier investment firm. Suburban home with a pristine lawn and an over-leveraged mortgage. Married his college sweetheart Claire. 2 kids in private school. Soccer practice every Saturday. He'd also been quietly drowning for the past year and a half. His firm lost 3 major clients, their credit cards were maxed out, and Claire's curated Instagram lifestyle was financed on borrowed time. Still, Ethan clung to the illusion of success, just like Dad did. I appreciate the advice, I said softly, meaning it more than he could ever understand. Also, Dad wanted me to check if you need help with rent. We don't want you ending up homeless or anything. His concern was genuine, which almost made it worse. They saw my minimalist loft, secondhand furniture, and assumed I was surviving by a thread. They had no idea the truth. I'll be okay, I replied, but thank you for thinking of me. After hanging up, I walked to my desk and opened the encrypted portal, the one tethering me to the world my family didn't know existed. The latest A. Rivera exhibition at Whitmore Gallery had sold out in 3 hours, with pieces fetching between $8.00 and $15 million each. My phone buzzed. Harrison. Acquired 5 early Genesis pieces at an estate sale. Family didn't know their value. All secured. Shall we discuss authentication for the upcoming retrospective? I smiled, typing back, family thinks they sold them for $50.00 each to help clear the garage. Let's keep it that way for now, I typed. Harrison's response came within seconds. Understood. Your secret is safe. These pieces could anchor the retrospective we discussed. The retrospective. Harrison had been pressing for months, an ambitious solo exhibition that would cement A. Rivera as a force in contemporary art. It would be a career-defining show, the kind critics salivate over, the kind that drives individual piece values north of $20 million. But retrospectives bring exposure, and exposure invites scrutiny. A single slip and the facade I'd so carefully built could collapse. My anonymity was armor, and my family's ignorance was the steel plate behind it. They dismissed my work so completely they never bothered to glance at an art magazine, never noticed that A. Rivera's paintings echoed the doodles stacked in Mom's old garage. They didn't connect the brush strokes they mocked to the pieces rewriting gallery records in New York and Paris. The next morning, I drove out to Long Island to visit Dad. The house hadn't changed, a shrine to middle-class triumph, lined with sun-faded family portraits and plaques from local business associations. The leather sofa sagged in the same spot where, at 19, I'd announced I was majoring in fine arts, and triggered a 2-hour lecture about practical careers. Anna, Dad said, opening the door with that brittle enthusiasm he reserved for his wayward youngest child. Ethan told me he spoke to you about the garage sale. I hope you're not upset about the paintings. Not at all, I said, sinking into the couch. Good, good. Relief softened his features. Ethan was worried you might be hurt. We didn't ask first, but honestly, those paintings were just taking up space, and $50 each was more than I expected, given that they were amateur work, I offered, smiling faintly. Dad flushed, clearing his throat. The art world is tough. Even talented artists can barely scrape by. I've always worried about your financial stability. I understand, I said lightly, and I appreciate that you and Ethan are looking out for me. Actually, Dad continued, leaning forward, voice dropping into his serious register, that's what I wanted to discuss. The garage sale made us realize how precarious things might be for you. Ethan and I think it's time you considered a career change. Here it was, the intervention I'd anticipated for years, dressed up as concern. I've spoken to a few clients who own businesses around here, Dad said, sliding a thick folder across the coffee table. There are openings in administrative work, customer service, even entry-level accounting if you're willing to learn. You're still young enough to start over in a practical field. He'd prepared this like a boardroom pitch. Inside the folder, job listings, career transition guides, articles about finding stability after failed dreams. I know it's not what you imagined, he continued, his tone soft but firm. But dreams don't pay the bills. And Anna, the art world is brutal. If you're only making $50 for paintings that take months, the math just doesn't work. I looked at the papers spread out before me. Customer service representative, $32,000 annually. Administrative assistant, $28,000 with benefits. Bookkeeper, entry-level, 0 cents starting salary. My last painting sold for $14,200,000, 0 cents. These look like good options, I said, genuinely touched by the effort he'd put into helping me find stability. Can I think about it? Of course, he said quickly, relief flickering across his face. Just don't wait too long. The longer you cling to this fantasy, the harder it'll be to transition to the real world. The real world. If only he knew. If only he knew I was negotiating with 3 major museums for permanent installations, that my work was the subject of graduate seminars in art theory, that collectors from 12 countries were on waiting lists for my next series. After leaving Dad's house, I drove straight to my real studio, not the modest loft they all think I live in, but a 5,000 square foot converted warehouse in Brooklyn's industrial district. From the outside, it looked like every other brick building on the block. Inside, it was a sanctuary. Towering canvases bathed in natural light from enormous skylights. Works in progress on professional easels, the air rich with the scent of oil paint and ambition. This was where A. Rivera existed. I pulled out my phone and called Harrison. "I've been thinking about the retrospective," I said, trailing my fingers along the edge of a canvas that would likely fetch $20 million when finished. "My family just sold 5 of my early pieces for $50 each. They have no idea what they were worth. If we do this show," I added, "if A. Rivera steps into full view, they might connect the dots." Harrison was silent for a beat. "Are you worried about the reaction?" "I'm worried about losing the shield their ignorance gives me," I said quietly. "Right now, they're so sure I've failed that they don't look too closely. That invisibility has been priceless." "But it's also capping your influence," he said finally, "and you know it. If you think this twist was wild, wait until you see what happens when Anna walks into the family dinner with the truth in her back pocket. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the jaw-dropping reveal in part 2. A. Rivera's work deserves to be seen, studied, celebrated," Harrison said, his voice steady but impassioned. "You're not just creating beautiful objects, you're shaping conversations about identity, power, and what it means to exist in this era." He wasn't wrong. Every brushstroke I laid under the pseudonym A. Rivera carried intention, grappling with economic disparity, environmental fragility, and the hollowing loneliness of digital life. These weren't just paintings, they were provocations. "What if we structure the retrospective to keep the mystery intact?" I suggested. "No interviews, no artist appearances, just the work. We could make anonymity part of the statement." Harrison paused, then his voice warmed. "A phantom retrospective? That could be even stronger. The absence of the artist becomes the critique, the ultimate commentary on celebrity obsession, and the commodification of art." We spent another hour outlining what could be a career-defining moment, a retrospective that would shatter records without shattering my cover. Anna Rivera would remain invisible, while A. Rivera took center stage. That evening, Ethan called again. "Anna, I've been thinking about our talk yesterday," he began, his voice softer this time. "Claire and I talked, and we want you to know, if you need help transitioning to a real career, we're here. We could even help with a loan for training or certification programs." For a second, I couldn't speak. The offer was sincere, and that made it worse. Ethan was willing to dig himself deeper into debt for a sister he thought was failing when his own finances were crumbling. "That's incredibly kind," I said. "But Ethan, are you sure you're in a position to help right now? I know things have been rough for your firm lately." Silence stretched across the line. "What do you mean?" His voice had an edge now. "I just meant the economy's been hard on everyone. I wouldn't want you to overextend yourself for me." "Anna, I'm doing fine," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Business is strong? Claire and I are comfortable. Successful people help family. That's what we do." That defensiveness told me everything. His entire identity was staked on being the golden child, the one who made smart choices. Admitting cracks in the facade? Unthinkable. "I appreciate that," I murmured. "But I think I'm going to be okay." "Anna, listen to me," he pressed. "I know you don't want to let go of this dream, but at some point you have to face reality." If only he knew reality was worth 8 figures, and counting. "You're 32 years old," Ethan said the last time we spoke, his tone measured but laced with judgment. "You live in a tiny loft, you're barely scraping by, and now you've lost 5 paintings that took months to make. This can't go on forever." 32. To them, that number sounded like failure. But in the art world, I was practically a prodigy. Most painters didn't break through until their 40s, if they ever did. And yet, under the name A. Rivera, I had stormed the gates by 30, earning critics' praise as one of the most influential voices in contemporary art. "You're right," I told him softly. Patterns can't last forever. 3 weeks later, the Whitmore Gallery made the announcement. Envisional Truths. 5 years of vision. A Rivera retrospective. The art world detonated. Collectors and curators scrambled for tickets. Museums lobbied for acquisition rights. Features dominated Art Forum, ArtNet, and even the New York Times, speculating about the reclusive genius who had transformed painting into social commentary. Some compared the phenomenon to Banksy. Everywhere these works weren't murals on alley walls. They were commanding 8-figure prices in pristine galleries. And my family? Oblivious. Dad called to update me on great office admin roles he'd found. Ethan texted about a customer service opening at his friend's company. Claire emailed links to certification programs in bookkeeping. They were so busy rescuing me from my failed dream that they never once wondered why every headline screamed the name A. Rivera. The retrospective opened on a crisp October night. I stood across the street from Whitmore in jeans and a plain sweater, anonymous among the buzz, watching as a parade of black cars and couture gowns swept toward the gallery doors. Inside, the canvases that had consumed my nights now hung like altars, commanding reverence and record-breaking bids. Harrison's texts poured in. Opening night, 3 pieces sold in first hour. Major museums submitting acquisition offers, critics calling it the most significant exhibition of the decade. My phone rang. Ethan. Anna, where are you? I've been trying to reach you. Just running errands, I said. Technically true. I was running the errand of silently witnessing history. Good. Listen, I have news that might cheer you up. Remember that art dealer who bought your paintings at the garage sale? He called Dad today. My pulse skipped. Really? Yeah. Apparently he's been doing some research and thinks your work might have more potential than he thought. He wants to meet you about representing some of your new stuff. If only he knew. Harrison was executing the plan flawlessly. We'd agreed on this gradual approach, a way to let my family hear whispers of opportunity without ever glimpsing the empire behind the curtain. He mentioned the contemporary art market is hot right now, Ethan continued, his voice tinged with hope. Said artists with your style are finding new audiences. He paused, then added, he thinks you might be able to sell pieces for a few $100s each if you build the right connections. A few $100s. Meanwhile, the painting that had sold minutes ago had gone to the Getty Museum for $18,700,000 0 cents. That sounds promising, I said evenly. It is, he pressed on. Anna, this could be your big break. Even if you made $500 a painting and did one a month, that's $6,000 extra a year. Add a steady job and you'd finally have real stability. $6,000. My work had generated over $200 million in sales over the past 4 years. I'll definitely follow up with him, I said softly. You should. And Anna, I'm proud of you for being realistic. Letting go of big dreams is hard, but sometimes scaling back is the first step toward success. After we hung up, I slipped inside the Whitmore Gallery. The space pulsed with energy. Collectors, curators, critics moving through the rooms like currents, their voices low and reverent. Every wall bore a piece of me, illuminated under perfect light, discussed as if these canvases were sacred texts. The brushwork here is extraordinary, a woman murmured to her companion near one of my recent works. Whoever A. Rivera is, they're operating at a level most artists never touch. Tate Modern is negotiating for 3 pieces, another voice said. This show will cement their legacy. Toward the back, I found them, the 5 paintings. Ethan sold for $50 each. They glowed under spotlights, each accompanied by placards detailing their historical significance in A. Rivera's evolution. A small crowd gathered, murmuring as a collector spoke with authority. These early works alone are valued around $60 million. They capture the pivot point that redefined contemporary painting. $60 million. Ethan thought he'd saved me by unloading them for pocket change. Harrison appeared at my side, sharp in his tailored suit, his expression calm but eyes gleaming. Magnificent turnout, he said softly, as though to a stranger. A. Rivera's work never fails to captivate. It's remarkable, I said, slipping seamlessly into the role of fascinated onlooker. I've never seen paintings balance such technical mastery with such profound conceptual depth. And the anonymity? Brilliant. In a culture obsessed with fame, A. Rivera forces us to focus entirely on the art itself. Harrison gave a subtle nod, his expression neutral for the benefit of nearby ears. Exactly. After a few minutes of art theory chatter, he moved on, leaving me alone with my secret and the weight of a success I couldn't share. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad. "Hope you're having a good night, sweetheart. Remember to follow up with that art dealer Ethan mentioned." Even small opportunities can lead to bigger things. 2 months later, I was back in the same Long Island living room where Dad once lectured me about practical careers. Sunlight filtered through heavy drapes as he adjusted his reading glasses and held up an issue of art news. "Listen to this," he said, excitement brightening his tone. "It says this A. Rivera person has completely reshaped the contemporary art market. Individual paintings selling for over $20 million. Can you imagine?" "Incredible," I agreed smoothly. He continued reading. "Critics are calling them the most successful anonymous artists in history. Nobody knows their identity, but their work hangs in major museums worldwide." Ethan, lounging on the couch, chuckled. "Makes you think, huh? Somewhere out there, someone's pulling this off. Millions for paintings, and no one even knows their name." "It shows how competitive the field is," Dad added gently, glancing at me. "Whoever A. Rivera is, they've had decades of training, elite connections, representation from top galleries. It's not something you just stumble into." He meant well. He always did. He thought he was shielding me from heartbreak. "Anna," Ethan said, leaning forward, "did you ever follow up with that dealer who bought your paintings? He sounded serious about working with you." "I did," I said calmly. "We've had some promising conversations." Dad smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. Even if you never reach someone like A. Rivera's level," Ethan added, "there's value in art as a side income while you build a stable career." "Actually," I said, pausing just long enough to make them lean in, "I have news. That dealer showed my work to collectors. Interest has been strong. I've sold several pieces in the past few months." Dad's face lit up with pride. "That's amazing, sweetheart. How much did you get for them?" "Enough," I said, meeting Ethan's eyes, "that I can focus on art full-time for a while." He leaned forward sharply. "Anna, that's fantastic," Ethan said carefully, "but don't get carried away. Even if you sold a few pieces for a couple $100 each, that's not sustainable income. You still need to think about health insurance, retirement savings, all the practical stuff." "I understand," I replied smoothly, "but I think I'm going to be okay." Dad smiled with gentle pride. "We're proud of you, sweetheart, and remember, if this art thing doesn't work out long-term, you'll always have our support." 6 months later, I stood in my Brooklyn warehouse studio, surrounded by a new series Harrison swore could redefine my career. These canvases were raw, unflinching explorations of identity, family, and the masks we wear for those who claim to love us. Every brushstroke was a confession. I picked up my phone and called Harrison. "I want to do something different with this collection," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to sign them with my real name and a..." Silence crackled on the line. "Are you sure? That would reveal A. Rivera's identity to anyone who connects the dots. Your privacy, your family dynamics, everything changes." "I know," I said quietly, "but I'm tired of being invisible to the people who matter most. Maybe it's time they really see me." 3 months later, the Museum of Contemporary Art unveiled its headline exhibition, "You Maked, the True Vision of Ana Rivera," formerly known as A. Rivera. The announcement detonated across global media. The enigmatic figure who had redefined 21st century painting wasn't a reclusive European master or celebrity experimenter. She was a 32-year-old woman from Brooklyn whose family had once sold her early works at a garage sale. Headlines screamed, "Anonymous art icon revealed," and "Family unknowingly tossed $60 million 0 cents worth of paintings." My phone didn't stop buzzing. Interview requests from Vogue, The Times, even the evening news. But the call I waited for came on a Tuesday afternoon. Nana. Ethan's voice was small, brittle. I just saw the news. Is this real? It's real, I said softly. But how? When? Those paintings you sold for $50? They were worth about $12 million each. The buyers were my dealers, under strict orders to acquire anything that surfaced. Silence stretched. Anna, I need to see you. We all do. Can you come to Dad's? An hour later, I sat in that same suburban living room, but everything had changed. Dad and Ethan looked at me like they were seeing someone entirely new, which, in a way, they were. I don't even know how to process this, Dad said finally, his voice rough. All these years, we thought you were struggling, that you needed our help and advice, and instead, you were one of the most successful artists in the world. I exhaled slowly. I was protecting something I'd built, I said. Your assumptions about my failure became my camouflage. Ethan's gaze dropped to his hands. I sold $60 million worth of art for $250, he murmured. The dealers who bought those paintings were acting under my instructions, I added gently. I needed to make sure they were recovered safely. Dad blinked hard. But why didn't you tell us? Why let us worry, offer you money we couldn't afford, try to steer you toward a practical life? Because you never asked what I was actually doing, I said softly. You saw what you expected to see, the struggling youngest child who needed saving. We were trying to help, Ethan said, his voice small. I know, I replied, and it came from love. But your help was built on assumptions, not truth. We talked for hours that day, unraveling years of misunderstanding, rebuilding something honest from the ruins of old expectations. It was painful, it was healing, it was necessary. Dad's eyes glistened as he finally spoke. I spent so many years trying to shield you from disappointment in the art world. I never imagined you'd already conquered it. I smiled faintly. You were protecting the daughter you thought you knew. Now you have the chance to know the daughter who actually exists. Across the room, Ethan scrolled through article after article on his phone, his jaw tight with disbelief. It says here your work is in the permanent collections of 12 major museums, that you've changed the trajectory of contemporary painting. Critics are comparing you to the most important artists of this century. That's true, I said simply. And we missed it, Dad whispered. You missed it because you weren't looking, I replied. You were so sure I was failing that it never crossed your mind I might be succeeding. 6 months later, they stood beside me at the opening of my latest exhibition. This time as proud relatives, not worried interventionists. Dad wore a tailored suit he'd bought for the occasion. Ethan had spent weeks memorizing art terms to avoid sounding lost. As we moved through the gallery, surrounded by canvases that had once been secrets, Dad slipped an arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry it took us so long to really see you, he said quietly. You see me now, I replied. That's what matters. Nearby, Ethan spoke to a journalist, proudly calling me his sister, the visionary, while carefully omitting any mention of the infamous garage sale, a story now cemented as art world legend. For years, my family told me what my work was worth, $50 a painting, at best. They never thought to ask what I'd actually built. Now they knew the difference between assumption and reality, and so did I. I never imagined this journey would unfold the way it did, years of being underestimated, quietly building something monumental, while the people closest to me saw only failure. Now, here I am, standing in the light they never thought I'd reach. If you followed me through this story, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have revealed the truth sooner or kept the secret a little longer? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every one of them because your perspective matters to me. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Not because it helps the channel grow, though it does, but because it means you believe in what this story represents: resilience, self-belief, and the power of rewriting your own narrative. When you subscribe, you're not just joining a channel, you're joining a community that celebrates quiet victories and hard-earned triumphs. Here's my advice. Don't let anyone else define your worth. People will project their fears and limitations onto you, sometimes even those who love you most. That doesn't make them villains, it makes them human. But your dreams? They're yours to protect, nurture, and defend, even if that means walking alone for a while. Build in silence if you must, but never, ever doubt the value of what you're creating, because one day, the same voices that doubted you will stand in awe of what you've achieved. Subscribe, comment, and share your own story of being underestimated. Let's make this space a reminder that success isn't always loud, but it speaks volumes when it finally arrives.